It's for the new one. It's for,
I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, March 4th, 2014 meeting of the Township of South Orange Village Board of Adjustment. May we have a roll call?
Yes, Mr. Don.
Here.
Mr. Viscala.
Here.
Mr. Polifano.
Here.
Mr. Reeves.
Here.
Mr. Aller.
Here.
Mr. Shapiro.
Here.
Ms. Warren. Here. And Mr. Green.
Here.
Pursuant to Section 5, Chapter 231, PL 1975, this is to state for the record that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the public by posting and maintaining the annual notice of regular meetings on the bulletin board in Village Hall, by publishing the annual notice of regular meetings for 2014 in the December 2013 edition of the South Orange Maplewood News Record, and by filing said notice in the office of the village clerk. So the first order of business this evening is the approval of minutes of the regular meeting held on Tuesday, February 4th, 2014. So we have those minutes. I actually had the track changes. Mr. Adler, you had a couple suggestions. I think I had a suggestion, I think, for the resolution. So we see the track changes in here. Any comments about the suggested changes?
No, I think all the changes are appropriate. And I would move with the changes that the minutes be approved.
I second.
And Mr. Don.
Yes.
Mr. Polifano.
Yes.
Mr. Reeves.
Yes.
Mr. Aller.
Yes.
And Ms. Warren. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to insert one bit here. Before we do the oaths of office, I want to welcome our newest member, Mr. Paul Breen, who's down there on the end of the table for this meeting. We're glad to have you. We welcome you. And please feel free to ask us any questions you have or come to us with any comments. The board operates very nicely for a number of years, and we'll hope you'll make it an even better board. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
I'd also like to let everybody know that the members whose appointments had expired have been reappointed, so that would be Mr. Shapiro, Mr. Descala, and Mr. Semper are back on board. Welcome again. Glad to have you back.
Glad to be back. Thanks for the break.
So now we move into the oaths of office for those of us who haven't yet taken the oath of office.
Mr. Chair, we've distributed oaths to those members whose terms have expired and are about to restart, and also for Mr. Breen, whose term is restarting. And I'd ask if you would please simply read that outside, read that out loud into the record. Each of you can do it all at once.
Okay.
I, Paul Breen, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States and in this state under the authority of the people. And I do further solemnly swear that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all of the duties as a member of the South Orange Zoning Board of Adjustment according to the best of my ability, and that I will not use my office to grant preferential treatment, nor to seek personal gain, favor or advantage to the public.
Not available to the public.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you. If you could please sign your names on those and pass them down.
The part on the left is for you, I assume?
Right.
Right, okay.
Okay. Pass those to Mr. Dwyer. And now we move on to the approval of the resolution for case 1009, Ellen Butler Callas, 275 Richmond Avenue. This is for the deck in the backyard. This is where I had some comments intended to clarify Did you see these, Mr. Dwyer?
I did, Mr. Chairman. I thought they were good comments, and I have actually already incorporated them into the resolution, subject to the board's approval.
I don't know if anybody else had any comments on the resolution.
I just had one regarding the spelling of the architect.
Right, and I've added an R to the Amrock name.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions about the resolution? Otherwise, I think it was well-written, succinct. May we have a motion?
I'll move that we approve the resolution as amended.
Second?
Okay, Mr. John?
Yes.
Mr. Polidano?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Adler?
Abstain.
And Ms. Werwick? Yes.
Okay, so now we don't have an actual case to be heard, but we do need to just go over some orders of business and preparing for the future meetings. So, case 1004, 7 Fairview, this is a case we heard many months ago, has been carried yet again to the April meeting.
Do we have any feeling if they're actually going to show? Or is this a monthly delay?
We have no knowledge one way, no more so than any other month. I wanted to discuss at this point whether it would be appropriate and legal for us if they don't show up, because we told them to come back in April, right, Jetta?
Right.
That if they don't show up in April, that we dismiss their case without prejudice and they have to reapply.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think that's appropriate, given the long delay since they first appeared.
It's hard to remember what we were talking about. Also, it interferes with our scheduling of other applications when, we put other people behind them or them in front of others and so on, and it interferes with our scheduling. They've been going on for this for, I'd say, the better part of a year, if not a year at this point.
With very little reasons given to the board for the long delay.
Yeah, so there's not been any communication to either yourself or the engineer about the case. The applicant's not been in contact with questions.
You need to speak into the mic, Mike.
So there have not been communications between the applicant and yourself or the engineer?
Not with me, not at all.
Other than to say that they're not ready to go.
Right,
They give
right.
some brief reason that they're not ready to go, but there's no indication that they're actually
Yeah.
on the precipice of this happening.
I would venture to guess that they're waiting for a tenant so that they know what they're applying for. I think that's part of the issue, is they're trying to find someone to get in there. And if they don't have one to put in there, they don't exactly know what to apply for. That would be my guess. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly,
But I don't think we should be hanging, waiting for them. I mean, I would let them know that we want to hear them on April, or we're going to dismiss
And
it.
that's legal to do that?
Sure.
Okay, so then let's do that.
We're not denying them.
No, we're not denying them, but if they don't show up and we dismiss the case, they've got to do another application fee?
Correct.
Do they lose their escrow?
The escrow would still be applied. We would hold it and probably ask them to replenish the original amount if any had been spent, or no, if it had been spent.
Okay. But if they decide not to reapply, do they get their escrow back?
Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah, okay.
yes.
Okay, so there's the substantive reason for dismissing this, if we do dismiss it, is we've lost track of this. It's out of our memory now, and it's interfering with the orderly functioning of the other applications. All right, so will it be Jetta's job or your job, Mr. Dwyer, to alert them that we expect them to show up in April, or we're dismissing them without prejudice?
I'll do that, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. And then we have Seton Hall, who's been carried to May's meeting. If you recall, they are awaiting disposition of litigation involving the protective covenants between the various properties there in that block. And they think that their case will be, at the very least, be clear if that situation is settled. I'm not pretending to speak for them, but that's why they wanted to carry it. So I could see it actually being carried even beyond May.
Do we have any status on that?
I've not received any notice.
I haven't received any status update on that litigation.
Can we ask them?
Yes, we can ask.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea. So that will, similarly to help us schedule, if, we get a, if we get a bunch of applications suddenly.
You break into dance.
So, Mr. Dwyer, if you could just ask them, what they plan to do for May.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I have them scheduled first up in May. Also, we have a completeness hearing scheduled for April.
Correct. For your dentist.
Yes, for my
Sorry,
dentist.
I can't hear us.
Are you hearing things? We have a completeness hearing scheduled in April. And this is my dentist who's applying, and I feel down in the mouth about it, but I have to recuse myself. So Mr. Don is going to officiate on that one. I'll show up to open the meeting, but then I'll immediately recuse myself. So, in April, conceivably, we could do the completeness hearing, and then we move into Fairview and finish the substance of their hearing, and I'll sit for that. Is there anything else, Jetta, that you're aware of?
No, that's
Okay. All right, so also with Seton Hall, I'd been thinking about this. Our Historic Preservation Commission, they don't have any jurisdiction over this application, but I would like us to ask them to give an opinion about any historic merit to the property that's involved, any considerations about preservation of the Montrose Historic District, and how this application might affect the historic nature of the neighborhood. And
Well, I would, I agree with what you said, but I think I'd like to talk about it a little more globally in that I don't know what the process is for us referring things to them. And I don't know if there is one or if we should have one, but from my point of view, if there's an application that occurs in the Montrose Park Historic District Association, I would think that just as a matter of course, we should refer it to them. So we don't have to say, should we refer it, should we not refer it? I think it should automatically go to them because it's an application that's in a historic district. One of the main reasons they were formed was to sort of shepherd over things that happen in that district. Now, if we have other applications that happen outside that district, I guess we have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. But I'd like to sort of remove the need to agonize over the decision and just have a matter of course that if we have something that's in the Montrose district, that it goes to them. And they could come back to us and say, look, we don't have any input on this one. But I think it should at least go to them first.
And
Well, what goes to them, I think, is worth discussing. I mean, the reality is that typically a town that has a historic district or an architectural review board, the application goes to them, and the application is commented on by the historic or architectural review board. It's not kind of a blanket question is, can you tell us what the historic relevance of this particular property is? I mean, that's a big question, and it requires some research and effort on the part of the board. For them to review an application and provide commentary related to the application is, I hate to say it, perhaps maybe even less work, but more pointed to the application itself. So I would agree with you in that everything within the district, the fact that there is a district suggests that we should be giving, it's us and the planning board for that matter, should be giving every application within the district to them
But just
to
to be
look
clear,
at.
the ordinance is not specific to the Montrose
No,
Park
it's
Historic.
not.
It's not the whole town.
Correct.
And it formed a new board that does reviews of, with a set of criteria, right? So it isn't just, so I guess one of the questions would be, why would we only send I guess your point is there is at least a district. So
Right,
there are
everything.
named buildings that are outside the district.
Correct.
And then there is a district. And so your point is any named building as well as anything inside the district.
Right.
Right.
And maybe anything that's up to question that's outside the district, but certainly everything that's in the
My
district.
understanding was, when it was drafted, that the ordinance was providing for the automatic referral of those matters that are within the district, those portions of the township which are designated historic or those specific properties and/or any historic districts, that those applications that came before either land use board were supposed to automatically go to the HPC. They only issue certificates of appropriateness in 2 occasions, if it's a subdivision or if it's a demolition, but they have obviously a great role in providing advice about all of the properties that have historic nature, to let the boards know about that and what they would recommend.
What do we send to them? I mean, if we send them, we've done a completeness review on Seton Hall already, and I think we've said provisionally it's a complete application. But obviously, there were a lot of points in that application that we said pending further information we'll get in the hearing, right? So what do we send to them? The application as it currently stands?
That's all we have when it first comes in, so that's what's supposed to go to them.
And so in theory, we give it to them after completeness
Yeah, that's a good idea.
and before
Yeah,
hearing.
that's what I would say.
Yep.
That completeness should be when we refer it.
And then if there's further information that comes out on the night of the hearing, because we said, we'd like to hear more about blah, 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 just be aware, right? And the applicant brings in more information, it's up to the board to either be at the meeting or...
My guess is they would have somebody at the meeting.
If there's questions or concerns by the Historic Committee, would they send a representative to our meeting to enlighten us as to what we...
They haven't yet. My experience was in other towns where they would write a referral report back to the land use board with their comments, especially on, those more significant properties. They'd actually write a
So
report.
we simply have their comments, but we wouldn't have any discussion.
Well, remember, they're not a regulatory board. They're only advisory.
Right.
So I would think that what we would get from them would be just what Patrick just said.
Yeah.
And then we take that
Take
as
into
we take all the
consideration.
other testimony.
So at this point, we should be sending them the application that we deemed complete,
As a matter of course.
asking for May 1st for comments back by the May 1st meeting.
Yes.
So what I would propose to do is to draft some questions, and send them to Mr. Dwyer, and then Jenna could send the copy of the application to the head of the commission. And should the questions go through you, Mr. Dwyer?
Which questions are those, Mr.
Well,
Chairman?
I was going to come up with a couple right now. We could also do this offline. But this is the first...
Questions for the applicant?
Questions for the Historic Commission.
Oh, okay. All right. So
Such as...
they have their charge, though, under the ordinance, don't they? The ordinance describes what it deems to be historic and what
I think-
characteristics go into that.
Just give it to them.
I would think we should just give it to them
Yeah, I think
for comment.
questions are a
Not
bit...
give them questions?
Because it's leading, if
I
nothing
think it's
else.
leading.
Of course it's leading.
What good is it?
Whenever you get a consultant, you're leading the consultant, and it's like with the lawyer, you want to know the answer before, no, I'm sorry. Look, yes, it's leading. What's wrong with that? If we have particular questions, on the other hand, so I don't see any problem with asking questions. I don't see a problem if y'all want to just give it to them. I think
Well, give me an example of the question.
example would be, is this mansion one of the designated historic, that have it go on the record, one of the designated historic buildings? I don't think it is. What is it about possibly parking in front of the mansion that would do anything to the character of the historic district? How long, well, we're going to know how long the school has been there. If the issue isn't resolved of covenants, then they might comment on that. If isn't resolved, but that will probably be resolved, I hope. They could comment on the entrance of a university into a historic district, if they have any knowledge of that someplace else. You know, I don't know what level of expertise this commission has, and even though I'm asking for their review of this particular case, at the same time, you know, being in a position in my other business of asking for consultants, you got to be careful what you wish for, because you may get somebody that has different expertise, somebody who misses the point, or somebody with no expertise who's just shooting their mouth off and doesn't know what they're talking about. So, you know, that's my trepidation.
If I may, to that, Mr. Chairman, the membership of the HPC is codified, and they are required to have certain experience, at least some of the members, to help lead that group, experience in historic preservation, et cetera. So they do have some level of expertise and should be bringing that to bear on what was sent to them. What we don't have is, because they're new, what we don't have is the history of knowing what they're going to say, because they're just informed.
Well, you know, a more general version of what you're asking is you're thinking to basically define, in a sense, the scope of what we're interested in their comments on. That maybe it's not just the structure itself, you know, but it's also the use of the structure and the way the use of the structure may impact the zone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think if we're interested in hearing from them about use, that may be something they don't think of, right? They may take their charter pretty narrowly as to the structure. If we're interested in hearing from that as to use, I think that might be appropriate asking, not a specific question, but saying we're asking for your feedback on both the importance of the structure to the historic district and the town from a historic perspective, and how this use may impact the value of that structure to the town. Right? That definition of scope, I think I could see being important, and frankly, as the first case that we're referring, if we're interested in general in that broader question, broader input from them, that might be worth, in a sense, we're defining what we expect from them then going forward, right? Now, that's an interesting question, right? Do we want them commenting?
Is that in their charge?
That is an interesting question, whether or not they're, first of all, obviously use is the board's
Yeah.
That's right.
province.
That's right.
But it's an interesting question on how use affects historic quality and preservation. I hadn't really thought of that before, but I'm assuming, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that this HPC with the HPC having people who understand about preservation will
Naturally think that way.
Right.
My point is, and I think where I was going with Rusty with your questions is, in a sense, rather than asking very detailed questions, does parking in front, you know, that defining that we're interested in them commenting on both aspects at a general level opens the door for that.
More or less presenting a context in which we would like them to respond,
Yeah.
rather than specifics.
And given it's the first case, we're sort of defining how we'd like them to function relative to the cases before this board. Assuming we want them to comment on use, because, as you say, you know, that is a core function of this board.
That's our job to do that.
That's our job right now. You know, I think the reason you're asking the questions you're asking is because I think you're thinking, and I agree, that the way the structure is used could detract from or enhance the historic value. And I think use does matter. That's why this board matters, right? But
Should we be asking them to send a representative to the meeting to possibly clarify any questions from their response that are not clear to us?
Well, we know from experience with what used to be the Main Street organization that on occasion, larger applications, they would send a representative to the board to speak on a particular application. And I thought the boards were well served with that. I'm sure if this board has a significant application and asks for input from the HPC, that I'm hopeful they will be able to provide it.
So perhaps we should suggest that?
On a larger application, it might make sense. There is no
We don't have
liaison.
we don't
There's
have
no
a framework right
There's
now.
no liaison right now, as far as.
Well, in a sense, that's what's interesting, right? This is the first case, in a
Right.
sense, we're setting the ground rules of a framework right here, right?
I think the idea of having someone come for an application like this probably is not a bad idea. Because it might be worth, A, us being able to ask questions, and also for the applicant. You know, if there's a report and it's just sort of foisted in front of the applicant on a major application like this, since they are an advisory board, it would seem fair that they would be able to have someone to ask questions to as the applicant.
If they're authorized and able to speak for the board rather than for themselves, I think that might
Correct.
be a danger.
Okay.
What are the facts upon which they're going to give an opinion?
The
or a report?
application as it stands that we
With-
that we deemed complete.
Okay, so they're looking at that without any testimony?
That's my
clarifying-
point, is, that was my point, right, which is, a lot comes out in the testimony that goes way beyond the documents that are in the application that was deemed complete to start the hearing. All they have at this point is what was submitted, right? And so their testimony might well change relative to what's said in the hearing.
Good point.
So we should ask a representative that can speak for them to,
It's a possibility, I would think, on large-scale applications.
this is as large as we get. for
To
this
want
board.
that direct input, but I believe that they'd have to be able to speak for the board unless the board has come to some kind of consensus, then the representative shouldn't be speaking for them.
Going back to the asking them for an opinion, it sounds like we're really asking them, we should be asking them something like, including but not limited to. In other words, tell us whatever you think. And in addition to that, if you haven't otherwise covered it, we'd like answers to these questions. And then you could specify what you think is important.
I think that would be a wise way to do it, have specific questions. It's just, we don't want to, you know, I don't want to give away our responsibility and our authorities, particularly to this commission that we've never used before. We don't, you know, we have no footprint, we have no tradition, we don't know what they're going to comment upon, and we're not going to ask them, do you think this should be approved or not? That's not their, but, you know, it could get to that way if we don't have any questions for them. They may venture into that, and that's not what we want to hear. So, and of course, they will probably stray into some of the same testimony that our planner will offer as well. So,
Rusty, I have a
But
question.
they could also be,
Sorry. Would we then allow the applicant to ask questions as well? I mean, the lawyer in me can't help but think that how you ask the question sometimes leads the answer, and that if we're gonna give them open forum to tell us whatever they want, perhaps the applicant should be able to ask questions of them as well, to give them the opportunity to draw out what they're looking
right,
for.
so if they send us a report,
I don't
because we've never done this before, where we, you know,
Well, let me ask you a question. Aren't they, if we send it to them, isn't Seton Hall going to appear in front of them?
Yes.
It's not like we're just sending the drawings.
Oh, is that right? They're
They
going to have a
have-
hearing with Seton Hall.
They have a
in front of
hearing,
them?
certainly, on
Testify?
those two. When they
Correct.
need a certificate of appropriateness, yes, obviously, they have a hearing. On other cases where they don't need a certificate of appropriateness, that are not subdivisions and not demolitions, I'm not sure HPC is going to have a hearing.
Oh, okay.
but I think Paul has got a good point. So we get a report from the HPC that outlines various issues. Seton Hall's going to want to be able to see that beforehand and comment, just like we're getting all
Yeah.
over their expert for throwing stuff at us the day
That's right.
of a hearing. I don't want to throw at Seton Hall on the day of the hearing something that our HPC gave us.
I will
think
tell
that's
you,
fair.
I will tell you, in other towns where I've had applications that have been in front of an HPC, even if they were an advisory board, as the applicant, we appeared in front of that board, and we gave, it's not really testimony, because you're not getting an approval per
Answer
se,
questions.
but they ask you questions, you answer the questions, and then a report comes out, or they make a motion for some sort of information to be transmitted to the main board.
Whoa.
the performance is about.
Seton Hall heard us.
I'm so,
Nice.
don't,
What'd you do, Alyssa?
Don't worry.
honest,
Open the door.
sorry. You know,
Can we open the door? No, don't move it, or you'll trip over wires.
I wonder if the lights in this room are tied to the lights of the other room.
okay, sorry.
Or maybe the motion.
Steve, you saved the day.
Right, we gotta keep moving
We
around.
have to keep moving.
It's that technical expertise.
That's right.
And then there were 6.
Right.
An Agatha Christie novel here.
All right. So where were we? So they appear before the commission.
And then the report is generated,
right,
but at
right.
least, the
have
applicant
it.
is not getting it in a vacuum.
Right, they have input into it, and I agree with Bill, that if they want to go over front of the HPC and say, we'd like to speak to you, I'm sure the HPC is going to say, yes, please come in, and we'll ask you questions, and then we'll give our report. That makes sense.
And that report should be sent to us, and then we send it to Seton Hall in time for them
Sure.
Yeah.
to take a look at.
Yes.
So procedurally, I think that applicants within the historic district will need to supply an extra set of drawings for that board.
Do we really want the HPC to be commenting on everything that's in a historic home or historic district? Somebody wants to enlarge a deck by 1 or 2%, or widen their driveway, or put in a shed. Do we really want to start? We've been doing this for all this time, and I think doing a very good job of not letting bad applications through. Do we really want them opining on every little application? And a lot of applications are fairly routine, don't offer much new.
Well, I mean, they always have the option to send it back to us without comment. I mean, look, we sent the last application to the police or the fire department for the deck. We got a report back that they didn't have any comment on
Which
it.
was useful.
Or issue, right, yeah, no issue.
It was useful.
So to that regard, Mr. Chairman, if we send it to them and they say we don't have any comments, then
It might be useful. Okay.
I'm just having a concrete process where we don't have to make decisions eliminates any
Okay.
concern of people accusing us of
I
not being fair.
I would ask before we make a decision whether to refer everyone to them. Let's give it one chance here and see how it goes before we make that final decision. I'm
That's fine.
hoping it goes well. I also think that what I would like to do is draft some questions, send it to you all via email if y'all want to add any additional questions, and then we'll send it to a final version to Mr. Dwyer, and he'll get it to the HPC, and we need to do that right away.
are these application-specific questions, or are they just the general template of what we'd like to
Well,
hear?
These are application-specific questions to this application.
Okay. I wish our planner was here to help forge through this new process, which he knows, I think, better than I do, about how HPC is supposed to interact with us and the other board. But unfortunately, she's not here.
Well, we're not doing anything tonight, so maybe what we should do is just ask her to give us a quick note on the way she understands the process is designed to.
It is a long time between now and the next Seton Hall.
Yeah, well, I'll be in touch with her. In the meantime, if you've got any particular questions you want to ask, send them to me now, so I can collect them and try to get this done as expeditiously as possible. We'll send these to Susan Gruel, our planner, and see if she thinks these are appropriate questions to ask an HPC. Like I said, they may stray into planning. I'm sure they will stray into planning territory.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any detail in the application as it stands about interior or exterior architectural changes to the structure, right? All it says is they're gonna, I don't remember the language, but it's basically they're gonna clean it up and make it functional. It's kind of what it says.
Right, they're gonna use the house for offices.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they don't give us any details at this point, so I don't, other than the parking question, which is a use question, I think, I don't know what else we'd ask them, right? They're not asking to knock it down. And we have no details at this point of what they're going to physically
I'd like to
do.
know about the history of these sorts of things. This is not the only town in the country that has tension between universities and the neighborhoods. So I'm sure this has happened before. Is there some
I mean,
study?
so you want to ask them about,
Maybe
are there any concerns about a university in a historic district?
Yes, and maybe Susan Gruhl is our person to
I think she'd be
opine
better.
about that.
I think she'd be better qualified to do
Planning
that.
Advisory
Yeah, I don't know.
Service, so the APA would be a great source for that kind of question.
I mean, it could alleviate our anxiety or it could heighten the anxiety, but it would be information
I
about.
mean, to me, that would be a very broad question asked to a board that I'm not sure is about those questions.
Well, so then we'll go to Susan and also ask her, what is the limits? What's the scope of what they're going to help us to do? The more that I think about it, I'm not sure what they're going to offer us, but they're here, they're advisory. We're not, everybody's clear that they don't tell us what to do. We've been doing a great job for years. But I generally believe in more information rather than less, and maybe they could help us that way. All right, so we'll get back with Susan and get with her before we send anything to the HPC. Okay?
Yeah, although I think it's not a bad idea, what you're asking about general questions that the board would, on every application, want to hear their input on. I think that's a valid question. I'm assuming they're going to have some base level of information they're going to provide, but we don't know yet. So if there are any just general questions, what's the impact of this proposal upon the historic designation of this district, or something along that line? I'm assuming they're going to answer that, but,
Does anybody know, are either of the structures, either the school or the Graves House, were they designated historic?
Well, the
edifices?
Graves House is one of the is a contributing structure to the Montrose Park Historic District, but
It is?
there's hundreds,
That's
there's
a
hundreds of
different-
those.
yeah.
My house is. I mean, that one's probably more contributing because of its size, significance. The school, I don't think is a contributing structure.
No, but there are a few structures in the village that are designated individually.
Correct. I don't know if that one is or not.
Yeah.
I think that Mary,
It's in the ordinance, so.
yeah.
Okay, and let's take it upon ourselves to acquaint ourselves with the details of the ordinance also.
Well, I think we did this 6 months ago or so, right, where we received copies of the new ordinance. We read it, we discussed it a bit at the time, scratching our heads, frankly, about how we're going to implement this. I think one of the things that we discussed at that time, and maybe we should bring it up again now, is whether it needs to be added to the checklist. And because frankly, the ordinance is pretty specific. It's named structures and historic districts, it's demolitions and subdivisions. And so it'd be easy to add a question to the checklist that says, does this application involve any named structures, historic districts, demolitions, or something, which would be a flag to say this must therefore get reviewed. And maybe that's your way, Rusty, of avoiding the decks and the expanding the garage applications, because the answer would be no, right? And then therefore we don't refer it, right? But it's a pretty specific, the ordinance is pretty specific, and you could put a single checklist question.
I think that's a good idea.
All right, I'll get with Sal on that one. Is that reasonable?
yes, I mean, that would require an ordinance amendment. An ordinance amendment,
Yeah.
because the checklist is.
Well, frankly, it would have been a good piece to do.
The
along
checklist
with-
requires an okay.
Yes.
How do we
Well-
do anything in this world anymore? But I'll talk with Sal.
Okay, but that's not a bad, frankly, even pushing it back to the board for an ordinance is not a bad move in and of itself.
I think that's a pretty good idea. I like the idea.
But we obviously, the first part is to talk with Sal and craft language and make sure that we think it's a good idea. And, that this is what the Board of Adjustment wants to put in the checklist. So you give the Board of Trustees the answer.
That's right.
That makes it difficult for them to back out of because the answer is so obvious.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will talk with Sal about that. We'll get with Susan Gruhl on the HPC. If you've got particular questions that are you're burning to ask the HPC, please email them to me. Any other items?
I was just wondering how Paul gets copies of the things that we have, the applications that we have copies of.
He has the next,
Well, one was delivered to my home.
Like, for
Yeah, that's a
example,
new
Seton
one,
Hall,
but-
he's got the old material.
But how about Fairview and Seton Hall?
Well, I would assume Fairview, unless he's going to watch the tape, watch the video, he's not going to participate on Fairview.
Okay, Seton Hall?
You gotta get him Seton Hall.
Yeah, you'll need to send them Seton Hall, Jenna, definitely. Fairview, is everybody going to be here next month?
Yep.
For April?
I'll be here, I'm recusing on that, but I'll be here.
On the
to recuse
Fairview, you're
myself,
recusing
I
yourself.
think I already did.
Yeah, you already did.
Okay, so that's
I will-
one,
I will, I mean, I'm landing late the night before from Europe, but I am planning to be here. Right?
should Paul watch the video just in case? Because, you know, your plane could be late or
That's fine.
delayed.
I may not be here.
All right, so Paul, you're watching the video.
That's fine. Do you have a DVD or?
There's nothing
You
more
go
fun.
online.
Oh, okay.
There's nothing more fun than watching one of our own meetings on
Right.
your computer.
Drink a lot of caffeine first. that's
So,
all I can recommend.
this is the Fairview one. I forget what in the first date. It won't say that on there, will it? We don't know when it
Britney
was.
Spears music.
We don't want them to have to go through all the
No, no,
meetings.
no, we can-
Jetta can,
Jetta,
Jetta can give her that.
So Mr. Breen, when the Fairview one was held. And then you'll need to state for the record when you come back that you've seen it.
That's fine.
Okay. So, you know, as an alternate member, you won't vote unless two of us are gone. You're the second alternate at this point, and you're the first alternate, Paula. Okay. All right.
Also, there's a class that's gonna be offered, Paul, I don't know if you have to take the class that's offered for new members. NJPO is offering one in Kessler and West Orange in April. I forget the date, but if you go on the website for NJPO, they'll have it there.
And that's mandatory.
It's mandatory in the first 18 months.
Okay. All righty. What else? Anything else?
does anybody know how many meetings we're going to have in this room? Because
Hopefully less than
if
one.
we actually are going to have a hearing here, and there's going to be something going on next door, it's going to not go well. I mean, we were lucky we didn't have anything on the agenda
Yeah,
tonight.
look, on this meeting, I took the hit on this one. I said, this is going to be a short meeting. You could put us anywhere you want for
Okay.
this meeting. So
All right, that's fine.
they needed this for something else, but, you know, I'll send a,
Well, we have a non-sound absorptive wall between the two
well,
rooms.
in the
so-
regular meetings, we'll get the whole room. This is just for tonight.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
fine.
They asked if we even needed to meet tonight, and I insisted that we did, but we could take, I said we could basically
All
do
right.
any place. So this is not going to be the routine. It's a good question. Okay, anything else? So with that, our next meeting is scheduled for the first Tuesday in April, which is what, Jetta?
First.
April 1st,
Thursday.
7 o'clock.
Okay.
All right, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.